time. Today, we'll take you aboard the USS Hornet and talk to a veteran about the Walking Ghosts of Black History exhibit on this Veterans Day. We're also taking you inside a home restaurant. Yep, a home restaurant. They are growing in popularity in the Bay Area, and you'll find out why. But first, we're keeping an eye on an anti-vaccine mandate protest happening right now. This is near the Golden Gate Bridge. You can see a lot of people gathered there, many with signs. We're told this large group is anti-vaccine mandates. They have not moved onto the bridge yet, but we will keep you updated. Also, today there's new confusion over who should get the booster, even as this debate over vaccine mandates continues. But who should get the booster, as local and state officials sound a different tune from the CDC. And a fight over asymptomatic testing in the wake of Cal football team's postponed game against USC last weekend. The first major college football game in the country postponed this season because of a COVID outbreak. I do put the word outbreak in quotes because there is disagreement over whether this is the right word to describe the 44 positive cases in the football program. So joining us now to talk about it is UCSF infectious disease specialist, Dr. Monica Gandhi. Dr. Gandhi, great to have you here. So I'm just going to ask you, the Public Health Department of Berkeley put out a statement, right? They call this an outbreak. They say, quote, the state public health threshold for an outbreak is 3 cases in a 14-day period. Cal OSHA's workplace safety rules define any workplace environment with 20 cases as a major outbreak. So do you agree that with their 44 positive cases, what Cal had here was an outbreak? Was it?
So I don't know all the details of how many of the football players were symptomatic or not, and actually how many were vaccinated or not. So I don't think I can comment on this particular situation. I can tell you, however, that 44 cases or people having Delta in their nose depends on if we're doing asymptomatic testing or not. If you are testing asymptomatic vaccinated people who are not exposed to someone who is sick, then you have just actually not even followed CDC guidance, but you may get Delta in your nose. That's how transmissible it is. The question is it clinically significant? Is it causing symptoms in you? No, it's not, because that's asymptomatic. And can you pass it if you're asymptomatic and vaccinated? And increasing data shows us it's very hard to pass it on, at least by culture data, if you are feeling well and you're vaccinated. So we may have to change our definitions of outbreaks.
Yeah, but isn't it clear with 44 cases within one program, there's some transmitting going on? And I'm wondering, how is that possible, or likely, I guess I should say, because anything's possible, when you have 99% of the players vaccinated?
So the thing about Delta variant, and this is just true, is that it is highly transmissible and it has high viral loads. And what that means is that 2 fully vaccinated people can still pass it on. You can still pass it on to another person. However, what is the viral load of that person depends on their ability to pass it on to someone who's vulnerable, like an older patient. And for example, there are 2 studies that show us that I don't think asymptomatic vaccinated people are passing on very well. Number 1 is that there was a healthcare worker outbreak in the Netherlands of Delta, and they actually cultured people's noses. The virus, they actually cultured it, put it on a plate and see if it grew in cells, and it didn't grow very well. Why? Because your immune response is trying to kill it, and so the virus is sick and it can't pass on as well. Second study is from Singapore. It showed at a minute in time you can pass on the virus to someone else, but the viral load comes down really quickly if you're vaccinated. Totally makes sense. Your immune response is coming in to fight that virus. So the question is, and this is a true question, in the setting of Delta, if we swab a lot of people, we are going to see Delta in each other's noses. What's clinically significant? Can you pass it on? Does it make you sick?
So you swab, you test positive. Should you be declared ineligible if you don't have symptoms?
In a real world, in a research laboratory, say, we would do 2 things. We would measure the viral load in your nose, not just by what's called CT value on a PCR, because the IDSA says don't use that as a clinical test. So we would actually measure the viral load to see if you could pass it on. And we would measure its viability, its ability to grow in culture, by looking at it on a plate. Those studies have been done, and you're not as likely to pass it on if you are well and you're vaccinated. In fact, there have been 5 huge contact tracing studies shows that if you're asymptomatic and vaccinated, you're not passing it on very readily. 5 large contact tracing studies.
So do you think some of those players probably could have played and perhaps the game didn't need to be postponed safely
At
for
this
all?
See, at this point, it's the cat is out of the barn. They've tested positive. We don't do cultures. We don't do viral loads, and now they can't play because this has happened. They have tested. No, they can't play. But there was a study in the Annals of Internal Medicine from healthcare workers who tested positive one day, all vaccinated. The next day, all 33 of them were negative, and then 2 days later, they were still negative. So if you do repeat testing, they may not still have it in their nose.
Right.
And that's one of the good studies that shows us that you're probably not passing it on if you're asymptomatic
Okay.
and vaccinated.
But
But it's too late.
not only is it too late for them in terms of playing, based on the isolation rules, they also, I don't think they can go to class for like 10 days, I think, as well, or, you know, be around other people. And that is a question that's being asked at other universities as well, right? Should kids all miss class or have to isolate, you know, based on, for example, they show a symptom? They don't know whether or not they're positive or negative yet, but their university has the policy of saying, okay, then you stay put. What do you think should happen?
So I don't think that universities should have the policy that you just said because they may not have COVID. They may have a different type of virus, and you just caused learning loss. So what I really endorse and have been trying to push the CDC about is something called test to stay. And all test to stay means is that if you've been exposed to someone with COVID, or even that you have symptoms of something else, like a cold, that you get to test with a rapid test serially. And every time it's negative, you get to go to class. You get to go to class. And that way you don't stay out for 10 or 14 days and you restrict learning loss. You prevent learning loss because that's what we're doing with mass asymptomatic testing.
All right. Well, you've made statements about the relative safety of football as a sport. I think soccer, all those outdoors sports, because of the way that they're played outdoors. But other people disagree, right? They point out, look, it's a lot more than just being on the field and playing. It's the being in the locker room together, riding the bus together, staying in the same hotel when you travel. Do you still think running a football team during these times is relatively low risk?
Well, where I get that information from, and again, this game can't play now because I totally agree. Now we have 44 people on it who has Delta in their nose. However, going back to the outside football. So where did that come from? There was a JAMA study last year, but it was just conducted last year, but it was just published that literally some researchers watched football games in settings of high community transmission, no vaccines available yet. They analyzed exactly what the football players were doing, how long they spent in contact, how long they spent within time of each other, and there was zero transmission outside of football players in this large JAMA study, which I'll send for your readers. So that was a powerful study that shows us that outdoor activities are very safe. You're right that, of course, inside activities is where things can happen, which is why those football players were likely masking inside because that was a recommendation at the time. But there was zero transmission outside, zero.
All right. Thank you for all your thoughts on that topic. But I also want to move on to boosters because people are even more confused now than ever about whether they're eligible for a booster because the CDC has been saying 65 and up unless you have a medical condition or concern or live or work in a high-risk setting, right? But yesterday, California's Health and Human Services Secretary, Dr. Mark Gandhi, said if you want a booster, you're an adult, you should absolutely get one. And Santa Clara County is now saying they'll give any adult a shot if they got their original vaccine more than 6 months ago. So what's happening here? Has the science changed? Has the supply changed? Has the situation changed?
So the science has not changed. And the science, what is the science? So the FDA, when they reviewed the first application for booster shots on September 24th, put together 74 studies from around the world. There was just an article today about this that showed that the vaccines are holding up extremely well against severe disease in those under 65. The New York State data showed that over 65 is where we're seeing waning effectiveness against hospitalizations. So I strongly endorse over 65-year-old individuals, 65 and older, getting a booster. The data has not changed. However, what Mark Gandhi is reflecting is what Biden said in the middle of August, which is that all Americans should get a booster. The problem is that public dissent and that dissent among experts has been played out on the public stage. And unless we follow a good study that shows us this, you are looking like you're just making stuff up, actually. So I think it's more important to follow data. New York data, over 65, absolutely get a booster. FDA says it, get a booster. And then immunocompromised should have gotten a booster back in May. And then people who are at high risk and around a lot of COVID should get a booster.
So if I'm 35 years old, which I'm not, but hey, I just like to pretend, and I'm perfectly healthy, no need for a booster? Is that what you're saying?
Not by any scientific data set that we have in this country or worldwide. On the other hand, if you want to get one, of course you can get one. I doubt it's not going to be safe, but there is not the scientific data to say that you need a booster.
All right. We have only about 30 seconds, but I want to ask you about the fact that we're back in the CDC's red transmission tier in a lot of Bay Area counties. Some doctors are worried about a winter surge as cases are ticking up in the past few weeks. I know you always say, let's not just look at the cases, let's look at hospitalizations, but are you worried about a winter surge?
I think we're going to have increased hospitalizations with increased cases, but it is not going to be anywhere near last year. Why? Because we have vaccines, we have cellular mediated immunity, and the vaccines work.
All right, Dr. Monica Gandhi of UCSF, always great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, we're going to take you aboard the USS Hornet in Alameda, and we'll look at a brand new exhibit that you can check out to celebrate Veterans Day. All right, everybody, let's give you a Sky 7 live picture right now over the Golden Gate Bridge, and you can see off to the side the Vista Point, the gathering point before the bridge. There are, I would say, what, 80 people there gathered? Do we have a crowd estimate? Yeah, 80 to 100 folks who are protesting against a vaccine mandate. I don't know if we can look at the signs more closely to see if they are mainly targeting, for example, their schools or perhaps it's their workplace. We saw one sign that was anti-masking. And speaking of masks, I will mention that didn't have time to talk to Dr. Gandhi about it, but Miami-Dade County in Florida is lifting its school masking mandate tomorrow for indoors. Yes, the Bay Area typically goes in the opposite direction as Florida, but Miami-Dade County has been more cautious in its approach as a large city than some of the more rural folks or areas of Florida, I should say, just in terms of where they've leaned in terms of restrictions. And they deem it now, and as you know, their transmission at the current moment in terms of CDC tiers is no worse than the Bay Area. And many doctors will say it's because COVID has infected as many people as it can, or many of the people already have immunity through infections, and so therefore they just don't have as many hosts now, if you will, for the virus. But other people do also look at it and say, look, you know, if they're in the same place as we are, why are we so much more restrictive? So that debate is going on, but in the meantime, you can see those who don't want mandates, whether it's masks or vaccines, are gathering in front of the Golden Gate Bridge. They're expected to take to the bridge. I know there are strict kind of restrictions now on how many per party can get on the bridge in terms of a protest. So these may be the folks who are not allowed on the bridge, but they're still making their statement off to the side, while probably a few members of this party will be allowed through their permit to get on the bridge. All right, our next interview coming up. Welcome back. As we honor and thank our veterans this Veterans Day, we want to let you know there's a special exhibit you can check out now on the USS Hornet. Let's go live to Alameda on board the Hornet. Joining us from there is a veteran, Leon Watkins, who's also the founder and CEO of Walking Ghosts of Black History. Leon, thank you for your service, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, your group, Walking Ghosts of Black History, created this new exhibit on the Hornet. Before we talk more about the exhibit, tell us what your nonprofit is dedicated to doing.
Our nonprofit deals with two aspects of supporting active duty and veterans. One, we are a living history type organization where we lecture on information dealing with the African-American involvement in military history. And then the flip side is where we try to support veterans and active duty that are going to veteran status on their benefits, making them aware that they can go to school, get their health care, even housing for homeless under the HUD-VASH program.
That's fantastic work because obviously, you know, we respect veterans, but the fact of the matter is when they come home from service, they're not always given the support and dignity sometimes. And so that is great work. But let's talk about this exhibit. I understand it teaches us about prominent African-American female firsts in the U.S. military. Can you talk about that, or perhaps one or two of the women whose contributions we should all know?
Yes. Well, it started where I'd gotten a blurb about Marcolette Harris, who was the first African-American female to receive a star for the United States Air Force. And it stated that she had passed and she was buried at, she'd be the first African-American woman to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. And so that's what our theme was going to be for Veterans Day, but we realized that she was not the first. And so then we looked at featuring the first in their military branches of African-American women excelling and achieving the goals that they set out. So such as the first African-American female combat pilot, the first African-American female to receive a star both in the Army and the Air Force, the first woman to join the Coast Guard, and then the first African-American woman to die in combat.
All right, well, those are people we should definitely know, along with, of course, the first African-American Secretary of State, General Colin Powell. I understand you also have a special tribute to him as well, right?
Yes, yes, we did. And not only having a tribute, but we definitely had someone, we had the color guard, who then basically acted as an honor guard supporting the exhibit.
All right. Well, definitely we want to check out the exhibit. You have an interesting story, Leon, yourself. You grew up in the Bay Area. I think you were born in Richmond, and then you joined the Marine Corps. And then after retirement from the military, you worked in the movies, right? Glory,
Yes,
Driving Miss Daisy. Talk to me about how you kind of married your love of photography, film, and the arts, and this very important message and mission that you have to improve the life of returning veterans, especially blacks.
It basically started getting out of the Marine Corps and was looking to pursue as a freelance photographer. I happened to be in Savannah, Georgia, where my mother is from. And at that time they were casting for the movie Glory. And so I went on to the production office and became a production runner, to subsequently becoming background, where I also became Morgan Freeman stand-in. But what the hook was is having over 6,000 reenactors and researchers and historians telling me the story of something that wasn't told in school. And so the producer found out that I had an interest, and then my lifelong friend, who is the co-founder and president of the Walking Ghost of Black History, Larry Thompson, we came together and created the Walking Ghost of Black History on knowledge that we didn't know about. And so as we got more involved in the history, we realized as veterans ourselves that we were going through situations of where it was hurry up and wait as far as getting information on benefits, or we had to keep applying for benefits. And so we took our experience to help veterans understand that no does not always mean no.
All right. Well, Leon Watkins, we thank you for your service. As our viewer Elaine Perry watching on Facebook Live says, indeed, thank you for that and for sharing your story. And I invite viewers to check out Walking Ghosts of Black History, your website, as well as the exhibit on the USS Hornet now. Thanks, Leon.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You
and
too.
Just, you know, we're setting up a permanent exhibit thanks to the USS Hornet sponsoring us.
Fantastic.
So, more to come.
More to come. Excellent. Take care. Happy Veterans Day.
You too. Thank you.
All right, something that's come out of the pandemic stronger than ever, home restaurants. You know the concept? We'll take you to one of them next. All right, folks, we're going to put up Sky 7 just so you can continue to monitor this anti-vaccine and mask mandate protest that's going on. And my producer can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's probably a small contingent on the bridge. Usually when you receive a permit for taking part in a protest on the Golden Gate Bridge, they do limit the number. So those are probably the folks that are not, going to get on the bridge, or it is possible that they have a particular time on which they're allowed on the bridge. But we are, okay, we're told 3 people allowed on the bridge, or what? Oh, 3 p.m. is when it started. Okay. So it's been going on for 20 minutes. All right, take a look at this. My water break is starting right now. Have you eaten inside a home restaurant? Or maybe not inside, but used a home restaurant? This week, we reported on the first wave of home restaurants in the Bay Area as local counties start issuing permits for them to operate. We're getting a first-hand look at this idea that's growing in popularity. Joining us now is Chef Tina Aurora, owner of Curry Sutra, based in San Carlos. Good afternoon. How's it going, Tina?
Good afternoon. It's going fabulous. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Can I just tell you, Curry Sutra, I love the name.
Thank you. It was my mom and I actually came up with it over 20 years ago.
All right. Well, speaking of mom, is that where you got your cooking roots started?
That's correct. My parents actually had restaurants in the Midwest starting in the 80s, and that's where I was inspired. It didn't happen right away, let me tell you that. I didn't like the smell of curry when I was going to high school all over my uniform. So, but we got through it, and it just became, it's actually in my blood, let me say that. So, and now I'm doing it at my cooking school on the peninsula as well, and it's just been wonderful. So yes, my parents are my true inspiration.
I can barely focus because I'm looking at photos of this food and my mouth is watering and I'm getting very hungry all of a sudden. But this is Indian food, right? Is there a particular region of India?
Correct. So northern Indian. So we're from Delhi, and Punjab. So mostly it's northern Indian, but I also do teach and cook South Indian cuisine, as well as other cuisines, including Italian and Mediterranean Asian. But of course, Indian is my forte.
Okay, so I got to ask you, you have a home restaurant, and this whole concept is fairly new because even though California passed a law a few years ago allowing them, it was really the pandemic that drove the counties to set up the permit process to make it a reality. So you just got your permit. What does that enable you to do? Does that mean you can actually serve the food inside your home, or does that just mean you can prepare the food inside your home and people buy it from you and pick it up?
Correct. Great questions. So you can do both. I can have people in my home, and as a dining experience, they can pick up, I can deliver. So it's just like a micro kitchen, as like a small restaurant, basically. I have all the know-how, knowledge. I grew up in the restaurant business, so it's the only thing that's different is it's not really a brick and mortar. We don't take reservations, things like that. But I can scale it. So at this time, though, it's a nice leap pad to start and be just like a restaurant for to-go orders, or
wow.
I can invite you at my table too.
And obviously the idea is without the high barrier to entry, right, the expensive rent that you have to pay, a lot more great cooks who want to be chefs and work in the restaurant business can start their own. But a lot of viewers are wondering, hey, how can I be assured that this is sanitary and safe? So can you kind of show us, I don't know if you're in a position to kind of show us what you got there so people can see the setup or the food?
Yeah, sure. So basically, you have to pass an inspection. You have to be Serve Safe certified. I think I'm not like the norm of everybody else out there that is doing this because I grew up in the restaurant business. I have a cooking school on the peninsula. And so I have a few more credentials. But I mean, you just have to follow the rules. And I think anybody could do it that's passionate enough to do it. This is my small little kitchen here that I will be cooking out of. Although, like I said, do have a cooking school as well where we do corporate team building events as well. But again, everybody passes the inspections. There's a protocol, and then you're good to go. And it's just, again, the recipe for success, I think, is just having that passion. And my kitchen is super clean. I'm a kind of a neat freak, so no need to worry about that. Yeah.
So getting the permit, what is involved in the process, right? I assume not only do you submit an application, you have to go multiple steps, maybe learn some stuff, take a, I don't know, workshop on some things so that you understand food safety. I mean, I get it. You've had a long background before that and probably already had that under your belt. But what is involved in the process of getting the permit?
Right. So like you said, there is an application process, and then they will take a look at that. If that looks good, they'll come to your home. They'll do a quick inspection. I do have another inspection coming up once I get up and running so that they can see how I prepare everything. You do have to take a Serve Safe online course for safety. You get a certification, typically 3 years. So I already have that. But the difference is for this one, for the home kitchen, you will need a manager Serve Safe. So again, it's the same credentials as you would in a restaurant.
Got it. Okay. So are you open now, and how can people, find out what you're serving up and what's on the menu?
So, I'm really busy with my corporate team building events. So I plan to open after Thanksgiving. Folks can definitely contact me before then and order in advance, and we can set that up. And I'll probably run 2 to 3 times a week. For pickup, I'm not offering delivery at this time. And again, everything from Indian cuisine down to other cuisines like Italian and Mediterranean. But my focus and my niche is really plant-based, vegetarian and vegan, and gluten-free as well. So I incorporate a lot of spices and herbs and promote wellness in eating.
All right, Curry Sutra, easy to find, unique name. Congratulations, Tina Aurora. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We'll take a short break on the air, but the conversation continues on Facebook Live right now. All right. Hey, should we show folks the Sky 7 one more time? You can see more people are gathering now for the protest by the Golden Gate Bridge and on the bridge itself in terms of an anti-vaccine mandate protest and anti-mask. It doesn't seem to be bringing traffic to a stop, although you can see it's slowing down traffic. Always hard to tell if it's just people exiting the city, because that is the direction that the slow traffic appears to be. But usually when drivers do notice a big block of people there, it does have the effect of creating rubbernecking and slowing down the traffic. So just be aware if you're planning to take the Golden Gate Bridge, there may be some delays right now due to this protest, at least on the approach. It looks like it's on the approach, and then it does loosen up and flow normally after you get past the protest point. Thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll be here every weekday at 3 on air and on live stream answering your questions. Before we go, let's take you live to Sky 7 again, where an anti-vaccine mandate protest is getting underway next to the Golden Gate Bridge. They are expected to march across the bridge at some point. Not a big impact to traffic at this point. Much more on ABC7 News at 4.